Hello, my name is Kim Coley and I make true crime videos. If you're interested, then keep on watching. So today's case is on Stephen Beard. Stephen Beard was murdered by his wife's lover in 1999 in Austin, Texas. So Stephen Beard, who was affectionately known as Steve, was born on November the 27th, 1924 in Austin, Texas. So Beard was a self-made millionaire. He worked himself up from the lower ranks of television, where he became a general manager and a partner of a Fox television network in Austin, Texas. So Beard had 3 children by his wife, Elise. Unfortunately, his wife passed away. She was diagnosed with cancer, and she died in October of 1993. Celeste Johnson was born in 1963. Her biological parents are unknown. She was actually adopted by Edwin and Nancy Johnson. Celeste reported that she was sexually assaulted by her adoptive brother as well as her adoptive father. So she had a really rough childhood. Her mother, Nancy, reported that she had never heard anything about Celeste being sexually assaulted when she was a child, but Celeste did come to her as an adult about the situation. So because of this, she went through depression. She also tried to commit suicide, and things were pretty rough for her. So when she got in high school, she met her first husband, Craig Bratcher, and she ends up getting pregnant at the age of 17 with twins. So she goes on to give birth to Jennifer and Christina, her twin daughters. And what's crazy about this case, and what also kind of drew me into it, is that, you know, her 2 daughters actually testified against their mother in court, saying that they believe that she was responsible for Stephen's death. But keep on watching. I'll talk more about that later. So Celeste, her marriage to Craig Bratcher was not very good at all. There was reported domestic violence in the marriage, and the 2 divorced. So Stephen visited a country club quite often, and this is where he met Celeste. She worked there as a waitress, and the 2 would kind of like talk and flirt a little bit until one day Stephen asked Celeste out on a date, and of course she agreed to it. So Stephen fell in love with Celeste immediately. He began to shower her with very expensive gifts. He bought her a car very early on. He reportedly brought her a $16,000 ring in the beginning of them meeting. So the couple married very soon after meeting. I think it was within that same year. So they go on to marry in February of 1995. So Stephen's family, they were totally opposed to the marriage. They knew right away that Celeste was probably a gold digger and was using Stephen for his money. So they were totally against it. But Steve was so in love with Celeste that he kept pushing for the marriage. Now, the one condition of the marriage was that in order for Celeste to marry Steve, she told him that he would have to adopt her twin daughters. Now, just to rewind back a little bit. So, as I stated before, Celeste and her first husband, whom she had the twins with, they got divorced. So after that, they went through like this custody battle where Celeste had given Craig full custody of both girls, and then she turned around and wanted to get custody back of her girls. So what ended up happening was Craig kept the one twin and then Celeste kept the other twin, and they both kind of did things that way, and then they would like swap out the twins for visitation. But unfortunately, by 1996, Craig Bradshaw commits suicide. He had been known to also struggle with depression. So Celeste wanted her children to have a father figure in their lives. So for this reason, she asked Steve to adopt her children, and the other twin went ahead and moved in with them as well. So things start off pretty good in the marriage, but slowly Steven starts to see that Celeste has a clear love for money. She's always asking her for money. She loves spending money. She loves shopping. They are living in a huge mansion that's over 5,000 square feet. So Celeste actually reported that he would give her $35,000 a month for spending money alone. And even that wasn't enough. So you would think that somebody that's coming from like being a waitress to now having married a multi-millionaire would be somewhat humble, but this was not the case for Celeste. Steven ends up giving her his credit card one day, and she goes out and spends $300,000 in one day. So this is where the problems in the marriage started to come about. So right after the point where Celeste spent $300,000 on Steven's credit card, he had a conversation with her and he said, you know what, like your spending is getting out of control. You know, you're gonna have to probably take all this stuff back, and something is gonna have to change because this isn't going to work. So at this point, Celeste started to cry. She said that she was going to kill herself, that he didn't love her, and she pretty much had a mental breakdown. So it was at this point where Steven said, you know what, she needs some help, and he put her into a mental facility. So when Celeste goes to this mental institution, she meets a woman there. And this woman, her name was Tracy Tarlton. She immediately fell in love with Celeste. It was like love at first sight. Tracy reported that as soon as she laid eyes on Celeste, she wanted her romantically. Tracy began to send love letters to Celeste, proclaiming her love for her, and the two started to spend quite a lot of time together in the facility. Now, they did not keep their relationship a secret at all. So to this day, Celeste claims that she was not romantically involved with Tracy at all, but staff at the mental institution, as well as her own daughters, have reported that they have seen Celeste being intimate and affectionate with Tracy Tarlton. So some time goes on and the two were both released from the mental institution. Now, immediately after their release, Tracy starts to visit Celeste's home quite often. The two are spending a ton of time together. If they're not spending a lot of time together, going out to eat or hanging out around the home, they were always on the phone together. Now, Celeste told her daughters that she thought that maybe Tracy had a crush on her, but that she would never dare date Tracy because she wasn't gay or anything like that. So her daughters actually reported that they had walked into a room and witnessed their mother and Tracy actually like being intimately involved, and that the two jumped up, shocked that they had been seen, but they tried to play it off as if it was nothing. So at this point, Celeste is still denying any romantic involvement with Tracy, although allegedly she had been caught red-handed by her own daughters. So it was around this time that Celeste began to confide in Tracy, and she told Tracy that she was being verbally abused by Steve and that she just felt miserable. She wanted to kill herself. She felt like there was no way out. So Tracy, hearing this, she began to feel very sad for Celeste. She believed everything that Celeste was telling her, although on the outside, Stephen had not been seen to have verbally abused Celeste in any way. So from her daughter's perspective, as well as what Tracy was saying, they had never physically seen Steve being verbally abusive. However, he did have a drinking problem, where Celeste would say he would drink every single day, and he would like pass out on the couch from the drinking. But in terms of any violence or aggressive behavior, nothing was reported in terms of that. So allegedly, Celeste tells Tracy that the only way that she could feel safe again is if Tracy killed Stephen. So Tracy reported that she had a hard time with this. She asked Celeste, was there anything else they could do? Was there any other solution to this problem? And Celeste told her over and over again, no, the only way that we can do this is if you get rid of him completely. Now, Tracy, remember, she has a background of mental health issues. She's in a very vulnerable state, and as well as Celeste. And to put on top of all that, she's infatuated with Celeste. She's in love with Celeste. She has been spending all of her time with Celeste. So she feels like she's obligated to save Celeste from this alleged abuse from Stephen. So Tracy agrees to commit the murder. So on September 29th, 1999, Stephen woke up and found that his intestines were hanging out of his stomach, and he was in severe pain. He immediately called the police. So during the 911 call, Stephen kept saying, they blew out. They blew out. Something blew out of my stomach. Okay, so let's rewind a bit. So on the actual night of the crime, Celeste's daughter, Christina, reported that she felt that it was very strange that her mother had told her, I don't want you to sleep in the house tonight. You could go to the guest house outside and sleep there with your boyfriend. So Christina is like, oh, I get some alone time with my boyfriend. She's a teenager. So even though she said she thought it was strange, she still went ahead and slept out there for the night because she got to spend some alone time with her boyfriend. Now, the other twin, Jennifer, ended up sleeping inside of the home. Some people believe that maybe Celeste wanted less people in the home at the time of the crime, which is why she had Christina sleep out in the guest house. So let's go back to the actual crime. So Stephen again has been shot in his stomach. He immediately called the police. The police are on their way. So Celeste was sleeping in a separate bedroom. So she ends up getting up and she runs to her daughter's room, Jennifer, screaming. She's very erratic, saying, oh my goodness, somebody's at the door. There's a bunch of flashing lights outside. I don't know what's going on. So Christina is like terrified at this point. She's thinking that, you know, whoever's at the door is a intruder or of some sort. So she immediately picks up the phone and she calls the police. So this is another point in this story that doesn't make a lot of sense, that she would mistaken red, blue, and white lights as anything else but the police or an ambulance. And also, instead of checking on Stephen first, Celeste immediately ran to Jennifer's room and then has her call the police. So looking back at the crime, investigators believe that she had not went to check on Stephen because it was clear that she was the one who had orchestrated the entire crime and was the mastermind behind it. So they get Stephen on the ambulance, and as Celeste and her daughter are watching from the front lawn, Celeste says something to her daughter that is very strange to her. She says, "If the police ask you, who do you think did this, do not mention Tracy's name." Now, Celeste denies that she ever said this to her daughter, but her daughter testified in court and she was adamant that her mother did say this to her. And it was at that point where she started to suspect that her mother was responsible for this crime. So after police begin their investigation, Tracy's name comes up immediately because she was a very close friend, aka suspected lover of Celeste. So the police go and visit Tracy's home. When they go there, they find a 20 gauge shotgun. And when ballistic tests were done, it revealed that the shell casing found in Stephen's bedroom was fired by Tracy's shotgun. She was immediately charged with assault and was arrested. So at this point, she was not charged with murder because Stephen had not died yet. So he actually was recovering from his wounds or injuries, and he had been in the hospital for about 16 weeks. Okay, so let's talk about when Steve was in the hospital. So Stephen had to undergo 7 surgeries to recover. And during this time, Celeste was right by his side. She was in there bringing him gifts, flowers. There's a picture of her bringing him like a big teddy bear. So she was right by his side during his recovery. And Stephen felt that Celeste was not involved in the crime whatsoever. She told him that Tracy was obsessed with her and that, you know, she was fully responsible, that she wanted to break them up, and that Tracy did this out of jealousy, that she wanted Steve gone. So after Stephen finally returns home after 16 weeks being in the hospital, Celeste claims that Stephen did not want a private nurse coming to take care of him. Now, Stephen was going to need a lot of medical care after being home. You know, he had to get his wounds cleaned and dressed and changed and so forth. So Stephen allegedly preferred that Celeste take care of him instead. He was recovering is what, you know, everyone had thought. He had all his surgeries were successful and he was just to be sent home to kind of recuperate and continue to heal. But only being home for one day in Celeste's care And now, like, you know, he's having to be rushed back to the hospital. That was very strange to police. So, unfortunately, after 3 days of being in the hospital, Stephen dies from a blood infection. Now, one of Celeste's daughters is actually like on camera saying that she saw Celeste like not cleaning her hands properly, and that, you know, she might have been a cause of his wounds getting infected. Just a side note, so after Stephen passes away, Celeste goes to a hair salon, and people at the hair salon reported that Celeste comes into the hair salon, and, you know, there was some gossip in the hair salon between the woman that Celeste, you know, may have been responsible for killing her husband. So at this point, she becomes very irate and upset, and she pulls out a butcher knife out of her purse and appeared that she was going to like stab someone, but she ends up stabbing herself in the leg. So at this point, she was admitted into a mental health facility for the second time. Now, when asked why she stabbed herself in the leg and she like just missed an artery, she said that she did it because she was so depressed that people were like, you know, making lies about her at the hair salon. You know, she was still grieving from Stephen's death, and she just didn't want to hear that at that time. So, not to mention, she said that at this point, her daughters had begun to distance themselves away from her because they suspected that Tracy did not commit this crime alone. At this point, they believed that their mother was involved in the murder of her husband, their stepfather. So this is where the case takes a drastic turn. So Tracy is in prison at this point. She's been in prison for about 5 or 6 months when she gets a newspaper and she's reading that her estranged lover, Celeste, has married another man just 5 months after Stephen was murdered. So immediately Tracy is like outraged by this. She immediately contacts the police and she gives them her story. So at this point, with this new information that police have gotten from Tracy, they then also speak with Celeste's twin daughters, Christina and Jennifer. Both girls testified that they had seen that their mother was in a romantic relationship with Tracy. No matter how she tried to deny it, they saw this relationship, you know, with their own 2 eyes. Christina also gave police a phone recording of a conversation that she had with her mother. Now, at this point, because Celeste was in the mental institution, Christina had, you know, control of her finances at this point. Christina said that Celeste had been asking her for money, and Christina would tell her, you know, you shouldn't be spending so much money, you know, we need to be more responsible. She just saw that her mother was completely, you know, being reckless with money again. So it was at this point where Celeste got really upset, and, you know, she kind of said in a rage, you know, that she had hired Tracy to kill Stephen. So she is on, you know, a recording stating that she was behind all this. Of course, Christina gives this phone recording to the police, and Celeste says that this phone recording was edited and that it was not her speaking, that her twins were setting her up. Now, Celeste also claimed that the only reason why her twins were testifying against her was because they had gotten so much, attention from the media, and she felt that they were just eating it up, and that they felt like they were actually gaining some type of fame from this incident, which the twins, of course, deny. Tracy Tarlton received a reduced sentence of 20 years for her involvement in the murder of Stephen due to her testimony against Celeste. In the end, Tracy said that she felt betrayed by Celeste, that she thought that she was helping her from an abusive husband, but had soon found out that it was all a lie since Celeste had moved on and married another man just 5 months after Stephen was murdered. Tracy felt that she had been taken advantage of and that she and Stephen were both victims in this case. So after 23 hours of deliberation, the jury found Celeste Beard guilty of capital murder. She was given a life sentence. Till this day, Celeste maintains her innocence. So, what do you guys think after listening to this case? Do you think that the prosecution had enough evidence to actually convict Celeste of this crime, as most of the evidence was hearsay? Let me know below in the comments.